Zora and Me, Chapter 21. At the crossroads that led either to Lake Matland or to the woods that held the loving pine, Zora practically ran ahead of me. Maybe she took off because she wanted the whole business to be over with as fast as possible. I know I did, but the feeling didn't put a fire under me. It pulled at my bones with dread. Approaching the loving pine, we could smell and then see a little fire in the clearing just in front of the tree, but no sign of gold. The canopy was so thick that the light of the fire made the deep shade surrounding it look like artificial light. Zora looked around and then started whistling the tune Ivory had sung to us. There was a rustling in the trees, and gold flew out. It was unmistakably gold, and yet I could hardly recognize her in the flickering firelight. Her tear-streaked face struck me most. The eyes that had seemed dark amber and round at Matland Avenue were now hazel and cat-like. Her hair wasn't just unkempt, it was ropey and heavy. She was wearing clothes I could only imagine on a rich woman, a dress made of thick brocade that rustled when she moved, and boots that looked softer than kid leather and must have been creamy white once, but they were ruined by rents and gashes in the clayey marks of the forest floor. The bridge of Gold's nose was like that of Rose's cousin, a girl in the year behind us whose whole family was so Indian there was no point pretending. Her skin took on the warm tones of the fire, and I could see that what I had thought was a glow from within this woman was really a golden undercoat. Gold may have looked white the first time we saw her, but here by the fire, afraid, she was more colored than white, and yet not colored like us. I recognized bits and pieces of us on her face and in her bearing, but even in the copper of the firelight, tan and all, she looked like she had been wiped down with chalk dust. "Ivory!" she called out, staring desperately in our direction. When we stepped into the clearing, her face fell, and she crumpled to the ground like a dropped marionette. "I thought you were someone else." She spoke to the fire, not to us. Zora swallowed hard, then said, "You thought it was your brother." Gold leaped up like she'd sat on a porcupine, startling us both. I put my hand to my heart. "You know Ivory? Do you know where he is? Have you seen him?" Zora glanced at me and then cleared her throat. "We came to talk to you because Ivory was our friend." She looked at us incredulously. "Ivory? Your friend?" We nodded. "Do you mind if we sit down?" Zora asked. Gold, we knew, wasn't going to be hospitable like regular folks because she wasn't in a regular folks' frame of mind. Gold didn't say anything, but gestured to the pine needles. It was like someone telling you to make yourself comfortable in your own parlor. I couldn't help but notice the fire dying, and just when I thought I couldn't find the impulse to stir some life back into it, she picked up a stick and poked it, turning the one big piece dry side down. I don't know who I thought would have made the fire for her, but up until that moment it hadn't occurred to me that she herself would know how. Gold listened calmly as Zora told her about overhearing her conversation with Joe Clark and about our meeting Ivory before that. Gold smiled a little, and a flash of the copper in her skin blew away a speck or two of the chalk dust. "I gave him that guitar when I was 18. Somebody gave it to me, and I gave it to him." Her voice was no longer had the measured and ladylike confidence it had in Lake Matland. Rather, it sounded like an echo of her carefree self. Instead of following Gold down the path of nostalgia, Zora pressed on. "Miss Gold, why did Ivory come to Eatonville looking for you?" I didn't expect the question any more than Gold did. She took a deep breath. Her eyes were looking across the fire at us, but in her mind she was looking right into her past. The first thing I remember is moving day. I was 3 years old when we moved into a boarding house on a colored street, across from Joe Clark's family. The Clarks owned the boarding house. Joe's daddy was a stonemason and a good one, and I guess he knew what to do with the money he made. That's maybe when my mama started to get sick. I'm not sure. I know that the only thing that did her any good was when she got in the grip of one of her spells was Ivory singing. I was fairer than my mama and much fairer than Ivory. Sometimes she would take me downtown and pretend to be my mammy so we could buy things in stores where colored folks weren't welcome. My mama said fooling white folks was never a sin if it brought us what we needed. Ivory never liked it, but I thought it was the top. I loved bringing my mama gifts, and that's what it felt like when we got to shop where we wanted. It was like I was a skeleton key unlocking another world just for my mama. My heart felt heavy trying to imagine folks not knowing my mama was my mama. I couldn't think of a single thing in the world I could want more than my pride in being my mama's daughter, and I felt a flush of shame for Gold. After my mama passed, we stayed on at the Clark's boarding house, and Ivory got work picking and hauling and doing all kinds of things. While he was working, I would go over to Silver Springs. Some white kids took a liking to me and invited me to do things with them. When Ivory found out, he was angry. I wanted to explore the world, the whole world, not just the colored world, but he would have none of it. I did it anyway. One day one of the white kids saw Ivory talking to me and thought he was an uppity nigger. So he got some boys together and beat Ivory almost senseless. Ivory got away and hid in the woods. I didn't know what to do. I ran back home and found Joe Clark. He came with me and helped tend to Ivory's wounds. In my mind's eye, I saw a young Ivory broken and battered and curled up like a baby on the forest floor. I was glad the Ivory of the past had Joe Clark there to help him. After that, Joe helped us out whenever he could and sort of watched over us. Zora put Gold's problem bluntly into words. Why would you want to be like white folks? Gold looked down and spread her hands out in front of her. I get tired of being colored. I get tired of seeing everything the world has to offer and settling for a bowl of nothing. With Will, nothing is off limits. I glanced over at Zora. She sat, rapt, listening to Gold. I couldn't stop the words from leaving my mouth. Was Ivory nothing? Gold's eyes welled up with tears. You're both lucky. You don't have to make hard choices. You know exactly where you belong. Ivory promised my mother that he would always watch out for me, and even when I ran away from him, he was always right on my heels. Zora spoke up then, but I could see her almost wincing at what she had to say. Miss Gold, it seems like sticking by your people, by the people you love, is the easiest choice of all. I imagined that Gold would rear up at that, either tell us to mind our own business or stop bawling, or both, but it was the opposite. Zora's words seemed to disconnect Gold from us. She stared into the fire and started talking to herself low and fast, oblivious. The chalk came to her face in an even thicker layer than it had when we first arrived. I saw Ivory just over a week ago. It was a Friday. No, it was Thursday. Out by the rail switch coming in Lake Matland. Will's been acting funny ever since that day. He must have followed me, just like those kids in Silver Springs did. What if Will thought Ivory was an uppity nigger, or worse? We sat completely still, letting the full meaning of her words sink in. He's been nervous and angry all week, asking me where I'm going, what I'm doing all day, and talking about going away for a few weeks. Oh, Lord, he's so rageful, so jealous. She stood up, wild-eyed. Oh, God, what if Will did this? I can't go back to him. I can't. She stood perfectly still for a moment. Then the realization of what she was saying knocked her to her knees. Her hair came forward and looked in the firelight like it had a life of its own, like tightening twine. Miss Gold, Zora whispered, where are you going to go? Gold got on her feet again. You girls need to go home, she said, and I have to get on, too. We watched Gold step over the fallen bark and through the wood brush in the direction of Matland. Both Zora and I had heard the phrase, lay down with the devil, before, but I don't think, staring at Gold's back as she headed away from us and toward something truly dark, that we understood what it meant until that moment. Zora grabbed my good arm and pulled me to my feet. Let's go home, she said.